I didn't plan to tell this story. I wanted to bury it under neat little versions of my life, the ones where I smile in photos and say I'm fine, where the past is a closed door and I've lost the key. But some nights when the house is quiet and the kettle clicks off, I still hear my own voice from that day, thin, pleading, a sound I didn't know I could make. So I'm going to tell you. Not because I want sympathy, but because I want to remember who I became when everything I loved broke in my hands. It started like a small light on a rainy afternoon. I had ducked into a coffee shop to escape a storm, water dripping from the edge of my scarf, the smell of cinnamon and ground beans wrapping around me like a blanket. He was there at the last table, laptop open, sleeves rolled up, the kind of man who doesn't force his presence on a room and somehow fills it anyway. When the barista misheard my name and called out Elena, I just smiled, but he looked up and said, "Alina?" As if he'd known me for years. I laughed. He grinned. We shared a table for lack of space and ended up sharing stories because we forgot not to. His name was Daniel. He listened. Not the way people wait for their turn to speak, but like your words were something to hold, something you might drop if you didn't steady them with both hands. He noticed things no one else did. The way I tapped my nail on the cup when I was nervous, how I kept my hair tucked behind my left ear when I'd rather not cry. He remembered what I told him about my favorite childhood book and saved a copy he found in a second-hand shop, scribbling a message inside the cover a week later. For the girl who still believes in quiet miracles. I introduced him to my family after a month. I thought it would be sweet. My father shook Daniel's hand with the measured approval of a man who had learned to guard his praise, and my mother asked practical questions about work and rent and years from now futures she liked to test people with. And then there was my sister, Maya. Maya was thunder in a clear sky. She walked into rooms and conversations rearranged themselves to face her. Growing up, I loved her because it was impossible not to. She laughed like a dare and cried like a storm. If I was a careful line of ink on a white page, Maya was paint thrown at a canvas, reckless and alive. The first time Maya looked at Daniel, it was a long look. Not lingering in a romantic way, I couldn't name it yet. It was more like recognition. Then she smiled a little too wide and said, "So this is the famous Daniel." It was a joke. She knew I'd been smitten, but something inside me bristled. The small things came first. Accidental bumping into him in the hall when we visited our parents. Texts at midnight that she said were memes, and "Don't be paranoid, Alina." A hand on his forearm that lasted a second longer than politeness. I told myself I was being jealous. I told myself Maya loved me and Daniel loved me, and the world would keep its shape because I believed it should. One evening Daniel asked to talk. He had that ruined look of someone who has spent all day thinking about how to say a sentence that will hurt. We sat at my small kitchen table, where a peach-scented candle sputtered in a pool of wax, and the refrigerator hummed like it was bored of our little lives. He said, "I made a mistake." My stomach dropped, my hands went cold. "Maya kissed me," he said, "and I didn't pull away fast enough." It was a clumsy confession, one that tried to sound noble and landed on the floor like broken glass. I didn't scream at first. I was still. I remember the sound of the rain on the window, how it was somehow gentler than my breath. "How long?" I asked. "It was just the once," he said, and I recognized the lie sitting behind the word just. I stood up and the chair scraped the tile and something inside me scraped too. "Get out," I said. He looked at me with wet eyes like he was owed forgiveness for being sad about his own betrayal. I pointed to the door. He left. What I did next I thought would save me. I drove to my parents' house in the middle of the night. Hands tight on the wheel, music turned off. The road a tunnel I wanted to outrun. The house smelled like cumin and floor cleaner. My mother opened the door in a robe, hair in a loose bun, surprise curving her mouth. I burst into tears and told her everything, my words tripping over each other, falling into her hands the way a daughter's grief should be welcomed. She paused, just a beat too long, and then said very softly, "Maybe Maya didn't know better. She's impulsive. Maybe she needed love too." I waited for her to take it back. I waited for the part where she held me and said what happened to me mattered more than her idea of who needed love first. Instead, she smoothed the sleeve of her robe and said my name like it was an inconvenience. "Alina, don't make this bigger than it is." That was when I screamed. Not at her, I screamed inside. I don't know how to explain it except to say that something very old inside me stood up and made a sound. I slept in my childhood room that night, Not because I wanted to be there, but because I didn't know where else to put my hurt. The next morning, Maya's voice came through the door like sunlight you wish you could block. "Can we talk?" she said, and didn't wait for permission. She sat at the edge of my bed and tucked her hair behind her ear like me. "I'm sorry you're hurt," she said, which is not the same as being sorry for what you did. "If he really loved you, he wouldn't have kissed me." Her tone was not cruel. It was clinical, as if she was describing weather. I felt small next to her certainty. I packed my bag that afternoon. My father tried to talk to me in the driveway, hands jammed into his pockets like he could keep his words warm. "You're my daughter," he said. "You don't have to go." But I did. Because sometimes the safest thing you can do is leave the familiar place that calls you by the wrong name. My new apartment had thin walls and a window that looked onto a brick wall a foot away. And I loved it because it was mine. The first night I cried so hard I gave myself a headache. The second night I made a list of things I had postponed for other people. Go back to school. Submit writing to journals. Stop apologizing for existing. The third night I slept without dreaming. Healing was not cinematic. It was holding on to small routines like they were railings. Tea at dawn, a jog along the canal, lipstick even when I was staying in, a sticky note on my mirror that said, "You're not hard to love." I signed up for night classes, editing, publishing, a seminar on contemporary women's fiction where my professor, Ria, spoke about sentences like they could break open a life. I took a job at a small press doing the unglamorous work of reading slush and answering emails, and sending author copies that smelled like glue and possibility. In the quiet hours after midnight, I wrote. Not about them at first. About girls who ran and women who stayed and the cost of both choices. One evening, my friend Hira from class found me rereading the same page in a cafe and said, "Come on, there's an open mic." I said no. She said, "I will drag you by your eyebrows." I laughed and went. When it was my turn, my voice shook. I read a piece that didn't mention names, only truths, and when I finished, the room was so still I thought I had failed. Then a woman by the window put her hand over her mouth like she'd been caught crying. And I understood that the quiet after a story isn't always emptiness. Sometimes it's reverence. I didn't check social media for weeks. I didn't check my mother's texts for longer. When Maya finally called, it was a video, and I saw, just for a second before I declined, that her eyeliner was perfect and her mouth was the same cherry color she used to steal from my vanity. I laughed in a way that made me a little sick. Daniel sent an email. The subject line was, "I'm sorry," and the body was an essay dressed as an apology, the kind that's really a plea to be told he isn't the villain. I didn't reply. He sent another, "I miss you," as if missing me was a favor he was doing for me. I blocked him. Grief has seasons. Mine turned to spring slowly, then all at once. Ria pulled me aside after class and said, "Do you have a manuscript?" I lied and said yes. I went home and wrote until my fingers ached. Hira brought me dumplings and told me my most annoying habit was thinking I wasn't a storm. My neighbor, an old woman named Mrs. Malik with silver hair like a crown, slipped a note under my door that said, "I hear you hum when you make tea." I did that once too when my heart was mending. Keep humming. I wrote. I wrote like I was digging a tunnel out of a buried room. I wrote about a girl who learns that love isn't proof of her worth because she had worth before love dared to notice. I wrote about a sister who thinks attention is oxygen, and a mother who confuses peace with silence. When I sent the manuscript to the press with a note that said, "No pressure," they sent a note back that said, "Can we talk?" We talked. They wanted it. The book came out with a cover that made me cry. The designer had chosen a small plant breaking through concrete. I thought it was too on the nose and then realized I needed obvious metaphors because my life had been full of hidden ones. People read it. Not millions, not some fairy tale, but enough. Emails came. "You wrote my life. I left yesterday. My sister too. My mother too." I realized I was not rare. That comforted and angered me in equal measure. A radio show invited me to speak. I said yes and practiced my answers in the mirror, telling my reflection not to blink too much when asked about blame. The day after the radio interview aired, my phone lit up with a name I had not allowed myself to say out loud in months. Maya. I stared at it until the call went to voicemail. She called again, then again. Finally I answered because I wanted to stop wondering what she'd say. Her voice was smaller than I remembered. "Alina," she said. And the way she said my name sounded like an apology had lost its way and accidentally turned into a question. Can we talk? What could we possibly talk about? I asked. My voice was steady. It felt like I had borrowed it from someone stronger. Daniel left, she said. I said nothing. He said he wanted someone who wasn't complicated, she continued, and I almost laughed at the irony of a man who had turned my life into a maze calling someone else too much. I think I made a mistake. You didn't think, I said. Silence held the line. She swallowed audibly. Can we meet? Just coffee. I stared at the wall and saw a version of my life where I said yes and the old choreography returned. Maya crying, me forgiving, our mother smoothing it all into a story where we were good girls after all. No, I said. Not now. Not like this. She cried then, messy and real, and I had to press my nails into my palm to remember she had wept before and wrung my forgiveness dry like a dishcloth. I'm sorry, she finally whispered. I know it doesn't help. It's not about help, I said. It's about who I am and what I can stand. I can stand you telling yourself the truth. Start there. After we hung up, I brewed tea and sat at the window. The brick wall was still there, implacable, a foot away. But the strip of sky above it was the clearest blue I'd seen in months. I thought about mothers and daughters, about the hurt we inherit and the hurt we choose. I thought about the ways my mother had raised us to compete for a love that shouldn't have been scarce. A week later, an envelope arrived with my mother's hand on it, that neat tidy script she used for bills and congratulations. I held it to my face and smelled the faint perfume she always wore. Something floral that tried too hard to pretend it had grown in a meadow. Inside was a letter. She had written it on cream paper, and the first sentence made me sit down. I was wrong. I read it twice. She did not excuse herself, she explained. She wrote about being 22 with 2 babies and a husband who worked too much and a mother-in-law who told her that daughters were a luxury you couldn't afford to spoil. She wrote about how Maya's tears sounded like blame and mine sounded like silence, and how she had mistaken noise for need. I wanted peace, she wrote. I thought peace meant keeping Maya from screaming. I didn't see that I was asking you to swallow your screams for her. I'm sorry. I am late. I am sorry. I cried so hard I had to stop reading. Then I read the rest. She wanted to meet. I know you don't owe me anything, she wrote. But if you can spare time for a coffee, I would like to look at the daughter I hurt and tell her I see her now. We met at a cafe near a bookshop, because if I was going to say things I had never said to my mother, I wanted the spines of other lives to witness me. She came in wearing the scarf I had bought her 2 birthdays ago. She held it like a promise she hadn't kept. You look thin, she said out of habit, and I laughed genuinely this time. You look like you, I told her. She took my hands. Her palms were dry. I read your book, she said. I recognized myself in the woman who wanted to pretend the house wasn't on fire. I said, was it? She nodded. And I told you to stop complaining about the smoke. We talked for 2 hours. Not all of it was beautiful. Some of it was petty. We took turns being kinder than we remembered how to be. She said she had called Maya after my letter, and told her to stop expecting me to be the floor she walks on. She said she had told Daniel, when he had the audacity to visit their home after leaving my sister, that if he ever came back, she would have my father remind him what doors are for. I didn't ask how. I didn't care. On my way out, she touched my sleeve and said, Do you think one day you might invite me to a reading? I said yes because I wanted to and also because I could. Boundaries are not walls. They're doors with locks you hold the keys to. Life grew around the wound. Sometimes it ached in the rain. Sometimes it itched when I was happy, as if to remind me that scar tissue is still skin learning to be touched. I started teaching a workshop once a week for girls who wrote like their hands were on fire. At the end of the term, one of them said, You taught me how not to apologize for my voice. And I went home and cried on my kitchen floor because the sentence felt like someone had returned a piece of my heart in a paper envelope. Then, because stories like neat symmetries, I saw Daniel again. I was signing books at a small table in the back of a store that smelled like dust and ambition, and he walked in wearing the same moral confusion he'd always worn, like a suit a size too big. He waited at the end of the line, and when he reached me, he tried to smile the way men smile when they want to pretend history isn't heavy. Congratulations, he said. I looked at him like he was a character in a book I had read too young. Thank you, I said. He shifted. I always knew you'd do something like this, he said. No, you didn't, I answered. If you had known, you would have treated me like a woman who could do things like this. It was not cruel. It was simply true. He swallowed. I made mistakes. We all did, I said. But mine didn't involve stealing lives. He laughed a defensive little laugh. You always had a way with words. I looked at the stack of books beside me. I learned to use them for myself, I said. He left. The bell over the door gave a soft apology as it closed. Later that week, Maya texted me a photo of a plant on her windowsill. A small green thing in a chipped mug, the kind of plant you have to remember to water. I'm trying, she wrote. I stared at the screen and let the feeling rise without naming it. Then I wrote back, good. Sometimes love is not an open door. Sometimes it is a porch light left on, not as an invitation, but as proof you have electricity. Months passed. The book settled into the world like a song that finds its listeners one by one. I slept well for the first time in years. I went for long walks without narrating them in my head as evidence of healing. I flirted with a man at the greengrocer in a way that made me laugh at myself, and then I went home alone because I could. Not because I was afraid, but because desire stopped feeling like a test and started feeling like a choice. Then came the twist no one had prepared me for. A cousin posted photos from a family dinner. My parents' anniversary, a small gathering. I scrolled idly, willing myself not to care about how my family laughed around a table I had once considered mine. Then I swiped to the last photo and found, in the corner, a face that made my stomach drop. Daniel. In my parents' dining room. Not with Maya, Maya wasn't there. But sitting next to my mother, not too close, smile careful, like a man rehearsing sincerity. I put the phone down and stood at the sink with the water running until I remembered to turn it off. I called my father. He answered on the second ring, relieved to hear my voice, the way he is when he has something to tell me before I find out another way. He came by, my father said before I asked. Your mother thought, he sighed. She thought she owed him a lecture. A lecture, I repeated, and the word tasted like copper. Why was he smiling? Because he's an idiot, my father said with a sudden fierce softness that made me sit down. Your mother told him to leave and never use our doorbell again. The smile was a mask he wore to the gate. I exhaled a laugh I didn't trust yet. And the photo? Your aunt takes pictures of hands and dessert plates in corners of rooms, he said, exasperated. He slipped into the corner of one. I told her to delete it. You saw it first. I sat on the floor, phone pressed to my ear, and thought about how easy it is to let the past pick the locks on your current joy. Thank you, I told my father, for calling it what it is. A mistake we won't repeat, he said. Your mother is crying. Not because of him. Because she doesn't want to hurt you again. Tell her I'm okay, I said. Tell her I carry my own water now. I didn't tell Maya. She messaged me later that night. A meme about cats trying to fit into tiny boxes. I sent a heart. There are wars you can win. Then there are wars you put down and walk away from because peace is heavier than victory, and you are tired of carrying weapons that look like open hands. A year after the coffee shop where a life began and a different life ended, I stood on a small stage with a microphone and read a new piece that didn't contain their names. It was about daughters teaching their mothers how to apologize and sisters learning that attention is not love and women choosing themselves without choking on the word, selfish. After the reading, a girl approached with a braid down her back and eyes too old for her face. She said, my sister slept with my boyfriend. My mom said boys will be boys. I thought I would die. I didn't. I found your book in the library. It felt like breathing. I took her hand. You will write your own ending, I said. Even if you don't put it on paper. That night when I came home, the apartment didn't feel small. The brick wall out the window looked like texture rather than prison. I put the kettle on and hummed without noticing until I did. And then I smiled because Mrs. Malik had been right. I hum when I make tea, which means a part of me is convinced I am a kettle, which means another part of me still believes in warmth coming back to a body that thought it had forgotten how. And then, because life isn't a straight line and I'm tired of pretending mine was, I invited Maya for coffee. Not because she had earned it. Because I had. Because there is a kind of closure that only comes from speaking a truth and sitting still while someone else's truth flails. We met at a place halfway between our homes, a geography of compromise. She arrived flustered and late, as if drama were not just a habit but a limb. "You look beautiful," she said, and I laughed because comparing sisters always starts there. "I look like me," I replied. We ordered. We sat. There were long silences like new roads. Finally she said, "I didn't just kiss him. It lasted." I told myself I was saving you from a man who didn't deserve you, but I was saving myself from feeling ordinary. Her honesty came out like a confession too heavy to hold. "I know," I said, and her head snapped up. "Of course you do," she said, and we both laughed, a weird little miracle. I told her she needed therapy. She rolled her eyes and then, to her credit, took out her phone and saved the number I recited. She told me that after he left, she had stood at the mirror and said her own name until it sounded ridiculous. "I didn't know who I was," she admitted, "when no one was watching me. I knew that feeling." I told her. We sat like that, two women who had both been wrong about what love was supposed to do to a person. When we parted, she hugged me lightly, as if hugging were a language she was trying to learn without an accent. "No promises," she said. "Only work." "That's all I trust," I answered. Later my mother called and said she had baked my favorite cake. The one with pistachios on top that crunch in a way that makes you believe in small joys. "Come if you want," she said. No pressure. I went because I wanted cake and also because I wanted to watch her try, that awkward flailing grace of a parent learning to love a grown child. We ate in the kitchen, around the island where 1,000 small family wars had been waged over report cards and makeup and curfews. "I'm reading more," she told me. "Your book club?" I asked, teasing. "Your book was the club," she said with a smile that held 100 apologies without crushing them. "I don't have a clean ending to give you. That's not how life works, and I refuse to lie to make you feel safe. Some days I wake up and the word sister is a bruise. Some days my phone lights up with a message from a stranger who says, 'Because of you, I left the table where I was only ever served scraps.' And I glow in places I thought were permanent dusk. I fell in love again once and it was lovely until it wasn't, and when it ended, I did not mistake grief for proof that I had failed. This is the difference. I do not bargain with my worth anymore. I do not hold it up to anyone like a coupon, asking for a discount on loneliness. If you're listening because you've been where I've been, sitting on a bathroom floor with your phone buzzing on the tile and the voice you love on the other end saying, 'It was just a kiss,' and your sister breathing into the silence, then hear me. You are not the sum of the people who couldn't carry you. You are not a math problem where their attention equals your survival. You are a whole sentence. You get to choose the verb. And if you are a mother who fears you've broken a daughter, call her. Tell her her quiet is not consent and her compliance is not proof that she is easy to love. If you are a sister who has mistaken the spotlight for sunlight, step into the shade and see if you can grow there, too. It's harder. It's worth it. This is what I know now. Love is not a test you pass by letting people cheat off your paper. Family is not a room you have to stay in because the furniture has your name on it. Forgiveness is not a performance. It's a boundary with a porch light. And I am the woman who left a house that kept calling my pain drama, and built a home that uses its inside voice when I'm tired. Sometimes I still see that first coffee shop in my mind. The rain, the way Daniel said my name like he was reading it off a page he wanted to memorize. I don't hate that memory. It led me here. I bless it and let it go. I bless the day I packed a bag and drove into a night that didn't promise anything. I bless the woman who woke up the next morning and made a list. I bless the list and the hands that shook while writing it, and the friend who dragged me to a microphone, and the strangers who cried because I had given them a sentence they could wear like armor. I am not the girl who begged for an apology at her mother's kitchen counter. I am not the woman who believed attention and love were synonyms because both made her feel warm for a moment. I am not the sister who thinks loyalty means silence. I am a person who learned to stay with herself when other people left, who learned to stand up inside her own life and say, "I'm here," and have it be enough. So this is my ending and it is not the last page. I will write other chapters. I will learn new names for peace. I will open my windows in the morning and let the day in without bracing for impact. If Maya knocks, I will answer or I won't, and either choice will be love. If my mother forgets and starts to hush me, I will remind her we don't do that anymore. And if she remembers before I speak, I will kiss her cheek and cut us both another slice of cake. And if you are where I was, if you are listening in a room that smells like your own tears, if you are convinced the world has ended because the people you trusted taught you a new word for betrayal, know this: endings are loud. But beginnings are quiet. A tea kettle, a pen on paper, a small plant learning your window's light. Start there. Start with the smallest thing you can choose and call it a revolution. The first revolution is often just staying when you want to run and running when you've stayed too long. I promise you this much. One morning you'll wake up and the person you begged to love you will be a shape at the edge of your memory, and you'll reach for your own hand instead. It won't feel like victory. It will feel like a morning. And that will be the point. You will pour tea. You will hum. You will look at the day, and it will look back at you, and neither of you will apologize for being exactly what you are.